When we hear the word grief, most of us immediately think about losing someone. We think about death. We think about funerals. We think about losing someone we love. But what if grief isn't always about losing a person? What if sometimes you can grieve a house, a job, a routine, a relationship that didn't end but changed, a version of yourself, a life you thought you were going to have? What if you can grieve something while still being grateful for what came next? Hey guys, welcome back to You Can't Sit With Us. This week we're talking about something that I've been working through for a while now. For a long time I didn't realize what the feeling was or what it meant, but it took all of about one therapy session a long time ago for someone to say, it's okay to grieve a life you lost. Sometimes I grieve the life I left behind. And I've spent a lot of time feeling like I shouldn't. Because the things that changed in my life weren't necessarily bad things. Some of them were actually really good things. Some of them were things that needed to happen. Some of them were things we stepped into because they were the right thing to do. But that doesn't mean they didn't cost us something. And I think that's where grief comes from. Sometimes grief isn't about something we chose to leave. Sometimes it's about something life required us to leave behind. And I think that's a different kind of grief. 3 years ago, our life changed in a really big way. My nephew came to live with us full time. My husband and I became his legal guardians, and we stepped into a life that we hadn't planned. And I want to be really careful when I talk about this because I never want anyone to hear me say that I regret it. I don't. I love him. I love our family. And I know that stepping up for him was the right thing to do. But it changed our life. Before that, my husband and I had a tremendous amount of freedom. We hadn't planned on having children. We could do what we wanted when we wanted. If we wanted to go somewhere, we went. If we wanted to sleep in, we slept in. If we wanted to make plans at the last minute, we could. Our life belonged to the two of us in a very different way. And then suddenly it didn't. Suddenly there was another person whose needs mattered. Another schedule, another routine, another little person who depended on us. And I love him. But I lost something too. I lost a version of my freedom. I lost a version of myself. And for a long time, I didn't know if I was allowed to say that. Because how do you say, I love this child, but I miss my old life, without feeling like you're being ungrateful? But I'm learning that those two things can exist at the same time. I can love the life I have and still grieve the life I had. I can be grateful and still miss something. And maybe you've experienced that too. Then another change happened in our family. My husband changed jobs and he went to third shift. And that changed our marriage. Not because anything was wrong between us, not because we stopped loving each other, but because our time together changed. Our evenings changed and our weekends changed. He didn't have weekends off anymore. And suddenly, the way we lived our marriage wasn't the way we had lived it before. And that's another kind of grief that nobody really prepares you for. Because your marriage is still there, and your husband is still there, and you're still together. But the rhythm of your life has changed. And sometimes you miss the rhythm you used to have. You miss sitting down together at the end of the day. You miss having weekends that actually felt like weekends. You miss being able to decide on a Friday night that you're going to do something together. Again, nothing was necessarily wrong, but something changed. And I grieved that too. And then last year, another chapter ended. My company was closing, and I had to find another job. And I was given an incredible opportunity to continue doing something that I genuinely love. It was a good opportunity. It was an opportunity I was thankful for. And ultimately, we made the decision to move our family for it. But here's the part that has been harder than I expected. I left my home. Not just a house, my home. a place that I had lived for 40 years. 40 years. That's a lifetime of memories and birthdays and holidays. That's ordinary days that didn't seem important at the time, but somehow became the memories you treasure. That's walking into a room and knowing exactly what happened there. It's knowing the sound of your house, the smells, the routines, the places in your town where everything happened, the pieces of your identity. And I still grieve that place. And I grieve that home all the time. And sometimes I think, why am I still doing this? I chose to take the opportunity. I chose to move. I knew why we were doing it. I knew it was the right decision. And yet, I miss it. And that's when I realized something. Knowing you made the right decision doesn't mean you won't grieve what the decision cost you. Nobody took my home from me. I didn't lose it because I made a bad decision. Life changed. I made the decision I could with the life I was given. And it was the best decision at the time. But I still had to leave something behind. And maybe that's why it hurts. I think sometimes we make grief harder because we think we have to justify it. We think, but I'm happy, but I'm grateful, but this is what I wanted, but things are good. So we tell ourselves we shouldn't miss anything, but gratitude doesn't cancel grief. You can be grateful for what you have and still miss what you had. You can be excited about what's next and still be sad that something ended. You can know you made the right decision and still wish the decision hadn't been necessary. Those things don't cancel each other out. They're both true. And maybe that's what I've needed to learn. Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, "For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven." A season. I really love that, because a season isn't forever. And that doesn't mean the season wasn't important. It means it had a beginning, and eventually it had an ending. Maybe my life before my nephew was a season. Maybe the years when my husband and I had weekends together were a season. Maybe the 40 years that I spent in my hometown were a season. And maybe the job I had before my company closed was just a season. None of those seasons were mistakes. They mattered. They shaped me. They gave me memories. They gave me experiences. They gave me pieces of the person I am today, but they ended. And maybe that's okay. I think there's so many people listening right now who are grieving something that nobody else recognizes as grief. Maybe your child grew up and you became an empty nester. Maybe you left a career or moved away from your hometown. Maybe your parents got older and the relationship changed. Or maybe your marriage looks different than it did 10 years ago. Maybe you're caring for someone now who once cared for you. Maybe your body changed and your friendships changed. Maybe you became a parent and suddenly realized you don't have the freedom you once had. Maybe you gave up a dream. Maybe you'd had to become somebody you never expected to become. Maybe you're looking at your life and thinking, I love my life. But somewhere inside you're still thinking, I miss who I used to be. And I want you to know you're allowed to say that. Because sometimes we don't even miss the thing itself. Sometimes we miss who we were when we had it. And that brings me back to the table. I've spent so many episodes talking about what doesn't belong at God's table. Fear, guilt, shame, comparison, anxiety. We've talked about all of those things, but I've been thinking, maybe grief isn't something we have to kick out of the room. Maybe grief deserves to be acknowledged. Maybe I can sit at God's table and say, God, I miss my home. I miss the way things used to be. I miss the freedom my husband and I had. I miss parts of who I was. And maybe God doesn't look at me and say, you shouldn't feel that way. Maybe he simply sits with me in it. Because Psalm 23:5 says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And I've thought about the table in terms of fear or anxiety or the things that steal our peace. But maybe there's another way to look at that. God didn't prepare a table for the version of me who had everything planned out. He prepared a table for me here in this life, in this family, in this home, in this career, in this season. In the middle of circumstances I didn't necessarily choose. And maybe that's what I need to remember. God doesn't only prepare tables for lives we've planned. He prepares tables in the lives we were handed. Sometimes the table he prepared isn't the table we thought we'd be sitting at, but it's still a table. There's still grace there. There's still purpose there. There's still joy there, and there's still love there, and God is still there. Isaiah 43 says, "Do not remember the former things, nor consider the things of old. Behold, I will do a new thing." And I don't think that means I have to erase my past. I don't think God is asking me to pretend that my old home didn't matter, or that my old life didn't matter, or that the woman I was before my nephew came didn't matter. I think he's asking me to notice something else. What is he doing now? Because if I'm constantly looking behind me, I might miss what's happening in front of me. Maybe I don't have to become the woman I was before. Maybe I can grieve her, thank her, and let God show me who I'm becoming now. Maybe I can remember the life I had without trying to live there again. Maybe I can love memories without needing to recreate them. Maybe I can say, "I miss you. I'm grateful for you. You mattered, but I can't live there anymore." And then turn around and look at the table God has prepared today. So if you're listening to this and you're grieving something, even if nobody else understands why, even if before you heard this, you didn't even realize that's what you were doing, I want you to give yourself permission. You don't have to convince yourself that you shouldn't miss it. You don't have to make the loss smaller because something good came afterward. You don't have to choose between gratitude and grief. You can have both. You can say, "I'm grateful for where I am, and I miss where I was. I love what God is doing, and I still miss what He allowed me to have before." Both can be true. And maybe healing isn't about getting to the point where you never look backward. Maybe healing is being able to look backward without wanting to go back. That's different. Maybe the goal isn't to stop grieving what we left behind. Maybe the goal is to stop letting what we left behind keep us from seeing what's sitting in front of us. Because there is still a table. There is still grace. There's still purpose. There's still joy. There's still a life being lived. And God is still there. So I'll remember what was, and I'll be grateful for what it gave me. And I'll allow myself to grieve what I lost. And then I'll turn around. I'll look at the table God has prepared for me today. Because maybe the things we left behind don't have to disappear. They can become part of our story without becoming our destination. And around this table, there's room for the woman I'm becoming. There's room for the memories. There's room for gratitude. And there's room for grief. But there's no room for shame over having feelings about the life I lived. Because I'm learning. I don't have to be ashamed of missing a life I loved just because I'm learning to love the life I have now. And that's where I'm sitting today. Right here, at this table, with everything I brought with me, and trusting God with everything I had to leave behind. So I'll see you guys next week. And until then, remember that sometimes the things we leave behind aren't bad things. Sometimes they're just things that belong to another season. And everything that doesn't belong in the season God has prepared for us now, you can't sit with us.